Throughout history, the quest to uncover the beginnings of life on our planet has been a persistent pursuit of humankind. One way to uncover insights into the origins of life on Earth is through the field of paleontology. According to the PWN dictionary, the science of paleontology involves the study of the ancient organic world during geological eras and relies on evidence such as fossil remains of animals and plants. As per the PWN lexicon, paleontology refers to the scientific study of fossil organisms, encompassing both plants, paleobotany, and animals, paleozoology. By examining fossils, paleontology seeks to reconstruct their structure. The field of paleontology can be categorized into three primary sectors: paleobotany, paleozoology, and anthropogenesis. Paleobotany focuses on the study of fossilized flora, or prehistoric plant life. Paleozoology, on the other hand, studies fossilized fauna, or the prehistoric animal world. Anthropogenesis, however, seeks to provide answers about the origin of humanity. There are three terms that are commonly used to refer to fossils, namely mold fossils, petrification fossils, and trace fossils. According to the PWN lexicon, fossils are the remains of ancient organisms that have never been preserved in rocks. These remains can take the form of imprints, casts, or mineralized parts of skeletons or entire bodies, such as mammoths preserved in permafrost, insects trapped in amber, and so on. The PWN dictionary defines fossils as the remains of ancient plants and animals that are preserved in the Earth's crust. There are many different types of fossils. The most desired type of fossil is that which has fully preserved organisms. However, the most commonly found fossils are those of partially preserved organisms. Fossils often occur as natural casts, which can be called internal and external casts. There are also fossils that are called organic geodes. Fossils that contain the tracks of animals or people are also compelling. Imprints of organisms in sedimentary rocks are very common. We can also find fossils of the life activities of fossil organisms, such as burrows, hollows, and coprolites, that is, excrements. Some specific types of fossils include organic combustible rocks, such as coal, lignite, oil, and gas. The Earth's crust also contains organic sedimentary rocks, formed from vast accumulations of petrified remains of fossil beings, such as bony and shell brachias, or rotligans, composed of the remains of sponges. Paleontologists have only been able to find petrified bones as remains of organisms. One valuable and esteemed type of fossil is amber, which often preserves insects or plant remains. The Bible teaches that after the fall of man into sin, death became a reality for all living beings on earth. This includes all terrestrial organisms without exception, as stated by the Apostle Paul in Romans 5:12. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, And in this way, death came to all people, because all sinned. Death leads to the inevitable decomposition of organisms. God spoke to Adam and Eve after their fall into sin, which we can read in Genesis 3:19. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. The Creator said that when an organism dies, it undergoes natural decomposition. However, it may also be consumed by scavengers or predators. In some cases, a dead organism can be dissolved in acid, as was the case with a chemist who dissolved her husband's body in a barrel of acid after murdering him. Corpses can also be damaged by heat. The Nazis burned the bodies of people who they gassed in crematoria. An organism can be completely obliterated by mechanical force or an explosion, such as a bomb, that can disperse a person within its radius. Regardless of the means of destruction, the ultimate result is the same. The body breaks down into chemical compounds and returns to its elemental state. As stated in Genesis, dust returns to dust. The natural decomposition of an organism is typically a short process that is influenced by factors such as temperature, conditions, and the size of the organism. What occurred in the Earth's past that resulted in the preservation of the remains of various beings as fossils, instead of undergoing decomposition? It is widely acknowledged that certain circumstances and conditions must have existed for organisms to become fossils. These conditions are currently almost non-existent in nature, aside from extremely rare cases. The explanation for the origin of fossils can be found in the biblical account of the Great Flood in Genesis. The catastrophic and violent conditions that arose during the flood led to the entrapment of fossils in the sedimentary rocks of the Earth's crust. The flood caused massive amounts of sediment, consisting of surface matter entrained and carried by water, to quickly bury the existing flora and fauna. When an organism was rapidly buried by sediment in an aquatic environment, the process of mineralization took place. This involved the organism being replaced and impregnated with mineral compounds that form rocks, which were dissolved in the water circulating in the sediments without access to air. To put it simply, the water that circulated in the sediments penetrated the buried organism and filled it with mineral compounds that form rocks, such as limestone or silica. These compounds were deposited in the tissue of the organism, which turned it into a fossil while retaining its shape. When the sediments hardened into a sedimentary rock, the organism within them was also petrified. Petrification can be humorously compared to the condition of well-worn socks. The socks absorb the sweat of our feet, which dissolves the salt and makes them stiff. If we didn't change our socks for a long time, they would possibly become so stiff that it would be impossible to take them off. Impregnated with salt from our sweat, they would almost resemble fossils. Depending on the type of mineral rock-forming compounds and sediments involved, petrified organism can be so remarkably well preserved that the details of its exterior will be clearly visible. However, during the flood, it was possible for the buried organism to dissolve in the solidifying sediments, leaving behind a geode that corresponded precisely to the shape of the organism. Crystals, such as calcite, could then precipitate inside. This is similar to what happened in Pompeii, when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. The city and its surroundings were buried in volcanic ash, along with its people and animals. During the excavation of Pompeii in 1864, a void was discovered in the solidified volcanic ash on one of its streets. A skull and bones was removed from the cavity, but the soft tissues of the body had not been preserved. To address this issue, Giuseppe Fiorelli, the director of the excavations, had the idea of injecting liquid stucco into these empty spaces within the solidified ash. When the gypsum hardened, the ashes were removed, resulting in casts of the bodies of animals and people who had died during the eruption of Vesuvius. The burial of an organism in solidifying sediments often led to the formation of a geode that was later filled with secondary material, such as silt, which also became petrified. This process resulted in a natural cast of the body known as cast fossils. While plaster casts of people and animals from Pompeii can also be considered cast fossils, they are artificial. Sedimentary rocks frequently contain organic imprints, such as those of ferns in coal shale. Delicate fern leaves that were buried with sediment were charred and left imprints in the solidified rock sediments. Animal tracks are an intriguing discovery in paleontology. During the flood, the flooded area was covered with sedimentary layers created by waves. Animals, in search of a safe place, passed through these layers, leaving tracks in the soft ground. Subsequently, the tracks were covered by another layer of sediment. These sediments underwent petrification, resulting in layers of sedimentary rocks with fixed tracks. Since 1908, the Paluxy Riverbed in Glen Rose, Texas, USA, has found successive discoveries in dinosaur, human, and mammal footprints imprinted in limestone. The footprints of a three-toed dinosaur were crossed by human footprints of a size that would suggest a man over 2 meters tall. When observing the path of the dinosaur and human footprints, it appears as though a person was following in the footsteps of a dinosaur, as the dinosaur's weight compacted the ground where there was less muddy sediment. Similarly, in winter, we tend to follow previously made footsteps in deep snow for convenience. Notably, a petrified human handprint and a dog paw print were found near dinosaur footprints in one location. Other findings have also shown the occurrence of dinosaur footprints and human footprints side by side in different regions. The discovery of multiple tracks of human and dinosaur footprints in the limestone bed of the Paluxy River provides evidence that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. As the floodwaters rose, the dinosaurs likely searched for higher ground, leaving behind tracks in the soft sediment. Humans may have followed in their path, seeking safety and higher ground as well. During the flood, sedimentary layers filled the burrows, hollows, and other signs of animals, including excrement. This led to the formation of fossils, such as pits, burrows, and coprolites, known as excrement. Some buried organisms were preserved through the formation of brine or bitumen in the sediment, which saturated their tissues and naturally embalmed their bodies. This is evident in the well-preserved remains of a woolly rhinoceros found in 1929 in Starunia, located 130 kilometers east of Przemyśl, as shown in the photo. The La Brea tar pits, located near Los Angeles in California, USA, have preserved mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and many other animals that became trapped in the tar. In the antediluvian Earth, the surface was mostly covered with land rich in flora. During the flood, large deposits of vegetation were carried away and deposited in certain areas, eventually being covered by sediments. When wood is buried with sediments in an aquatic environment, it undergoes significant pressure and high temperatures due to the weight of sediments above it. This process results in the transformation of wood into hard coal over time. It is believed that 30 cubic meters of plant material produced 1 cubic meter of hard coal. On the other hand, plant accumulations that were not deeply buried were transformed into lignite due to a lack of necessary conditions for hard coal formation. Both types of coal are considered combustible organic rocks. Organic matter from flora and fauna, when buried and trapped in a closed system in the aquatic environment, transforms over time into oil and its accompanying gas under the influence of enormous pressure and temperature. Refueling our cars and using gas for heating or cooking is essentially putting our prehistoric ancestors to use. Scientists are currently observing the formation of oil on the bottom of the Gulf of California. Dying marine organisms sink to the bottom of the bay, creating organic bottom sediments. Volcanism takes place under the bay floor. As the result of this, hot water and pressure act on these organic bottom sediments. Petroleum forms and rises to the surface of the sea. In addition to coal, another type of organic rocks are those formed from the accumulation of unimaginable amounts of organic remains of animals. Buried with sediments and mixed with rock-forming matter, subjected to great compression, merged with a mineral binder, they formed natural concrete. Shellbrexias, bony brexias, or rottlegends, made of sponges, etc., were formed in this way. According to the Bible, there was a massive outpouring of underground water from the depths of the earth, estimated to have reached a height approximately 30 kilometers. The water rose to the high levels of the atmosphere, where it froze, leading to catastrophic snowfall and hail of an unprecedented scale. This resulted in the instantaneous freezing, burial, and violent death of numerous animals. The permafrost in Alaska and Siberia preserves many of these animals in such good condition that their meat is still fed to dogs. Evidence of their swift demise can be seen in the food still present in their mouths. It is believed that the Siberian permafrost may contain up to 5 million mammoths, rhinos, and other animals. The most well-preserved fossils are those of small organisms from the plant and animal kingdoms that have been encased in amber. Amber is the fossilized resin of coniferous trees and potentially resin-bearing deciduous trees. Although amber can be found in different parts of the world, the most exquisite specimens are discovered along the shores of the Baltic Sea. The origin of amber remains an unexplainable mystery. What led to the separation of vast quantities of resin from the trees, which subsequently became buried in a free state and fossilized to create the present-day amber, remains a puzzling enigma. It is likely that an inconceivable number of trees, swept away by a flood, were compressed into a single mass and floated up to the water's surface. During this time, the broken trees oozed resin, which trapped insects, small animals, and plant remains. Over time, these became embedded in the fresh resin and were subsequently buried and petrified under catastrophic circumstances, along with the organisms preserved inside. Despite this, we don't observe the creation of amber today. One possible explanation for this is that the formation of amber was a result of a global catastrophe, such as the flood described in the Bible. The Earth can be considered to be a vast graveyard, with an ancient world buried beneath its surface. Prehistoric life forms trapped in the form of fossils are entombed within layers of sedimentary rocks. These buried flora and fauna have transformed into coal, oil, and gas, which serve as primary source of energy for modern civilization. Fossils, coal, oil, gas, and organic rocks are found in various locations worldwide. This occurrence of fossils globally lends support to the biblical account of a worldwide flood rather than a localized one. Fossil analyses led us to believe they were created during a catastrophic global flood event. The circumstances and conditions of this event were rapid and violent, resulting in the formation of fossils that no longer occur today. The preservation of tracks, coprolites, and jellyfish fossils is puzzling. Given the time frame required for sedimentary rocks to form, these organic traces of tracks coprolites, and jellyfish are known to decay quickly. Similarly, if coal takes millions of years to form, how have tree and plant fossils become so well preserved within it? Typically, large trees would rot within just a few years of falling in a forest. In addition, there are instances of multi-layered fossils, such as petrified trees passing through several rock layers. It's difficult to explain how these fossils could have been preserved if each layer took millions of years to form, as the fossils would likely have decomposed over time. What can we learn from muscle fossils? Complete fossils have been found exclusively of closed mussels, not open ones. These benthic creatures typically open their shells to feed and breathe, but will close them in response to danger. It's likely that when the mussels were caught in the catastrophic flood, they had sufficient time to close their shells before being buried and petrified in a closed state. If they had been slowly covered with sediment over a long period of time, their mussels would have become flaccid, their shells would have opened, and eventually they would have separated from each other after decomposing completely. It's worth noting that large numbers of naturally deceased mussel shells can be observed on seashores. The formation of fossils is often attributed to rapid burial. How else can we explain a fossil of an armored fish catching a predator in flight just above the water, or a larger fish swallowing a smaller one? In 1971, a paleontological expedition comprising Polish and Mongolian scientists unearthed a fossil in the Gobi Desert depicting two battling dinosaurs, the herbivorous Protoceratops and the predatory Velociraptor. Their violent conflict could not have lasted for millions of years. They were suddenly engulfed by the elements while fighting and were promptly buried. In Germany, near Holzmaden, a fossil of a pregnant ichthyosaur was discovered in the process of giving birth. A newborn ichthyosaurus can be seen swimming alongside its mother, while another is partially delivered. Their quick burial and demise are evident. Robert Gentry, an American scientist, conducted research in the 80s of the previous century on radio halos resulting from the decay of polonium-210 and lead-210 isotopes in charred compressed wood. Isotopes of elements emit energy during their decay and transformation into another isotope or element, causing the rock around them to become tinted in the form of spherical halos similar to a spherical rainbow. These halos are minuscule and imperceptible to the naked eye. We know that the half-life of the isotope polonium-210 amounts to 138 days. Radio halos of the isotope polonium-210 in the examined compressed and charred wood were also compressed. The half-life of the lead-210 isotope amounts to 22 years. Radio aureoles of the lead isotope 210 found in the same charred and pressed wood examined by Gentry were not compressed, but retained their spherical regular shape. These scientific studies show that the burial, compression, and fossilization of the wood occurred at least 138 days after the event. If the compression and fossilization had occurred before day 138, the polonium-210 isotope's radio Orioles, absorbed by the wood from the water circulating in the sediments, would not have formed yet. Therefore, the compression and fossilization of the wood must have occurred after day 138, resulting from the radioactive decay of polonium-210, which also compressed the radio halos of this isotope. After 138 days, as a result of the radioactive decay of polonium-210, radio halos started to appear in the wood. Only then did the compression and fossilization of the wood take place, which also compressed the radio Orioles of the polonium-210 isotope. Buried wood from the water circulating in the sediments also absorbed the lead isotope 210. The radio Orioles in the examined compressed and charred wood were preserved in an intact, spherical, and regular shape. This proves that 22 years after the burial, when the radio Orioles of lead-210 were formed, the process of compression and fossilization of wood ceased. Had it continued, the lead-210 radio halos would have also been compressed along with the wood. We can conclude that the process of fossil formation did not last more than 22 years, not millions of years. It was a relatively short process. Many fossils of flora and fauna are distorted by the compression of the sediments in which they are buried. When pressure distorted their bodies, they were not yet decomposed or petrified, so they retained the details of their structure and appearance despite their distortion. Had they already been petrified, the pressure would have crushed and destroyed them because rock is brittle and not malleable. Therefore, we can conclude that the period of fossil formation was relatively short, not exceeding more than a few dozen years, certainly not thousands or millions of years. It is important to note that fossils show fully developed organisms that adapted to life in their environments. Millions of fossils have been found and can be seen in museums or in private collections. They are all fully developed, the same as their current descendants. But no fossils of intermediate or transitional forms of organisms have been found. The lack of fossils of transitional forms of organisms is natural. You can't find something that never existed. The evolution of simple organisms into more complex ones has not been confirmed in the fossil record, which undermines the validity of the theory of evolution. The study of paleontology has revealed that prehistoric times hosted a significantly higher number of diverse organisms than the present day. Fossil records indicate that the current living organisms are only a small fraction, around 10% or less, of what once existed. Cast fossils are proof of a catastrophic event, which led to the extinction of most organisms. This event aligns with the biblical model of the creation of the world and the Great Flood. Fossilized life forms are often larger than their present counterparts, suggesting that living conditions were more favorable in prehistoric times, in line with the biblical model. God created a perfect world, which was flawless, but gradually deteriorated due to human sin, affecting the existence of all beings. The formation of fossils is without doubt the result of sediment burial in aquatic environments, as shown in the Bible. Modern science challenges the biblical account of God's creation and the global flood, which came as a result of humanity's sin. However, fossils contradict the theory of evolution and validate the Bible, as stated by Jesus. Jesus affirmed that even stones or fossils will cry out, confirming the truthfulness of God's Word. I will now read Luke 19:40. I tell you, he replied, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out.